Welcome back to the Philosophy of the Ananke, Part 14. This is Lance Gordon, your author, and we are into Chapter 6 at this point, Ananke and World Affairs, and I will continue where I left off the last time. Givers, takers, and absorbers. We have all been exposed to these three types of personalities. Givers tend to feel obligated to return a giving gesture. They give in various ways. Whether they are poor or rich, they tend to give that which is in excess at the very least. The process of giving makes a giver feel happy if it is received in a proper manner. They would rather see a world full of noble reciprocity than a world full of extreme self-interest. On the other hand, takers are always looking out for their own self-interest to the exclusion of the other guy's welfare. Just looking at the time. They take advantage of the givers in this world and bleed them of their energies. They bait people with small giving gestures, preferably words, and then proceed to reverse the situation to their own end. It's the takers of the world that turn most givers into absorbers. The property of being an absorber is a characteristic of the majority of us. We have been burned far too often by the takers and have resigned ourselves not to be a giver and not to be a taker as well. We practice a live and let live attitude. We enjoy receiving, but we do not find time to reciprocate. We do not pursue the givers, and we do not reward them either. We are the absorbers, who rarely give and rarely take. We would prefer to be givers, but we don't know how without getting burned and exhausted from the venture. In my estimate, 80% of us are absorbers, 10% are takers, and 10% are givers of various degrees. Just classify your relatives to confirm these odds. So most of us are absorbers who wish to be givers, if we just knew how. We would like to participate in a giver network. We would like to give to givers that would in turn reciprocate in their own way. This is not to say that tit for tat must be rigidly adhered to within this network. It does mean that giving something will precipitate getting something in return. A relatively rich giver may give money or opportunity, while a relatively poor giver may offer a moderate dinner party or cocktail hour at their house or apartment. Even talking and consoling another is a form of a give. A pep talk at the right time is worth at least $100. A phone call to a friend or family member without the intent of a favor does not cost any money. Therefore, everyone has something to give. Poverty is no excuse. But how do we form this giver network without being burned severely? How do we find a giver in the least painful manner? How do we find them efficiently? How do we avoid the no good deed remains unpunished paradigm? The answer is clear. Give once in a small way to a candidate giver, then be patient and wait. Invite the individual for cocktails or tea, perhaps a dinner out where each pays his own check. A group trip during a Saturday for 4 hours may be in order. In either case, do the inviting, make the first move, then wait for an action on their part. Do not be fooled by words or promises. Look for their action in the coming weeks. If the person is a taker, then he will pursue you and ask for favors before the relationship is 3 months old. If he is an absorber, you will never hear from him again. If the person is a giver, then the act of giving will be returned eventually. After the action is received, be patient and give again when it feels right. Within a year, the relationship will be solidified in a fair manner. Givers tend to remain friends over an extended period of time. Therefore, eventually, numerous givers will be networked to you. You will have more energy to find other givers, since the energy expended on givers is always replenished through reciprocity. Thus, by using the, quote, give once then wait, unquote, procedure, we can begin to create a giver network in the least painful way. Sure, we will fail approximately 90% of the time, absorbers plus takers. But the 10% success rate will be worth it. The reward will outweigh the pain of the inevitable failures. We will never feel alone again. The benefits of knowing givers will outweigh the cost of finding them. If we find them during our good times, then we will have them during our bad. We will not mind helping our giver friends and giver relatives, since we know that they will return the favor when they can. After all is said and done, it is better to be a smart giver than a kickback absorber. All benefit in this manner. Those who deserve help receive it. Those who can afford to give help, have a process by which they can distribute their fortune in a fair manner. Can this process work for the more severe cases of the people in poverty in this world? In a way of speaking, it can. For example, money should be loaned to those who are willing to convert it into machinery and the growing of crops, and who are willing to repay the loan with interest. Those who are willing to help themselves and others should be helped first. If they are not willing to work and pay back a loan, then they do not deserve the help. If they are willing to help others of their own kind when they are relatively prosperous, then they do not deserve the monetary loan. And let me say that again. If they are not willing to help others of their own kind when they are relatively prosperous, then they do not deserve the monetary loan or technological training. In other words, the givers of an impoverished country should be networked in order to help themselves and others. They should be found and organized so that their people may become self-sufficient. Will there be world peace? Again, this is Chapter 6, Ananke and World Affairs. There can be no doubt that war is a property of the human condition. It has always occurred in history at various locations upon this earth. Man's infliction of death upon his brother for his own self-interest is not a new story. But why is war needed by this Ananke? Will the bloodshed end? Will there be world peace? Let us examine some of the properties of war for a possible answer. Firstly, war has taken place on domestic soil until recently. War, power, and technology has divided the earth into major political governments that fight their battles on foreign soil. Self-interest has limited the aggressive behavior to conventional war games without the use of nuclear technology. The world is being conquered in a slow and gradual manner. The third world countries are being influenced to take sides. In this manner, the world will be incorporated into the dominant world powers that oppose each other out of necessity. Eventually, conventional war will be a thing of the past when the smaller countries are absorbed. Peaceful coexistence will be inevitable due to the opposing forces that will keep the peace in its place. In a strange way, the four patterns are being followed in this worldwide quote-unquote game. Dynamic equilibrium is being achieved by the opposing political forces that are attempting to create peaceful coexistence in a least destructive manner for their own self-interest. This is not to say that they have achieved the goal of dynamic equilibrium. The world is evolving to that state of affairs. Ananke's patterns take time to operate. Ananke acts as if it is not omnipotent. There is destruction and pain in the process, but the fact remains that we have more people today than ever before. The process is not that destructive. It apparently is the least negative approach for now. Therefore, Ananke is driving man towards peace for his own sake. Man has evolved to the point of understanding and utilizing the nuclear forces of the universe. Man is finally capable of obtaining true peace or total annihilation. There has been no other time in history when man has had the capability of nuclear power. Within 100 years, the outcome will become apparent. But isn't a nuclear war inevitable? Aren't we on the brink of disaster? Aren't the odds of nuclear war and total suicide extremely high? It would appear that way, but this is not the case. Let us examine some recent history for a possible answer. If a total nuclear war were to happen, then we would expect it to occur soon after the quote-unquote toy was found. For example, if you never drove a car and received one as a present, then you'd be more likely to have an accident in the first year or so of the experience. Indeed, we almost did have an accident back in 1962. The Cuban crisis was almost certain nuclear war. Why did it not happen? What protected us from total annihilation? Was it luck or was it design? What happened during those 13 days? Let us examine the facts for a possible answer. Tuesday morning, October 16, 1962, a U-2 aircraft reported photographic evidence that Russia was placing missiles and atomic weapons in Cuba. Wednesday, October 17th, photographs revealed at least 16 and possibly 32 missiles that were capable of hitting cities 1,000 miles away. They could be operational within a week. Thursday, October 18th, intelligence revealed that the atomic warhead potential of 1/2 of the current ICBM capacity of the Soviet Union was placed in Cuba. The missiles were being directed at particular cities within the United States, thereby being capable of annihilating over 80 million Americans within a few minutes after launch. Saturday, October 20th, the United States Armed Forces across the world were put on alert. Through numerous discussions, it was felt that a major attack on Cuba could not ensure the destruction of all of the missile sites. Some would remain and be launched against the United States. Therefore, President John F. Kennedy made the decision to blockade Cuba as the first offensive attack in order to avoid nuclear war. Monday, October 22nd, missile crews were placed on maximum alert. Troops were moved into Florida and the southeastern part of the United States. The Navy deployed 180 ships into the Caribbean. The B-52 bomber force was ordered into the air fully loaded with atomic weapons. At 7 p.m., President John F. Kennedy appeared on television to explain the grave situation in Cuba and the reasons for the quarantine. Wednesday, October 24th, a Russian submarine had moved into position between two Russian ships were within a few miles of the quarantine barrier. It was decided to signal the submarine by sonar in order to request it to surface when it approached the U.S. blockade. If it refused, depth charges would be released until the submarine would be forced to emerge. This could be considered the first moment in this crisis when the world was on the brink of a nuclear holocaust. Quite miraculously, quote-unquote, the Russian vessels stopped just before the blockade. President Kennedy ordered the Navy to allow the Russian vessels an opportunity to save face and depart if they were compelled to. Thursday, October 25th. Although the blockade seemed successful and talks with Premier Khrushchev were proceeding daily, the missile sites in Cuba were being activated at an alarming rate. One communication by President Kennedy is worth noting. In a long letter that he sent to Premier Khrushchev, he stated, among other things, that, quote, I have not assumed that you or any other sane man would, in this nuclear age, deliberately plunge the world into war in which it is crystal clear no country could win and which could only result in a catastrophic consequences to the whole world, including the aggressor. Friday, October 26th. All communication to Premier Khrushchev seemed in vain. President Kennedy ordered preparation for the invasion and occupation of Cuba. The second moment of near-nuclear war had occurred. However, at 6 p.m., a personally written letter from Premier Khrushchev arrived. It was long and very emotional and worthy of being summarized. In essence, Premier Khrushchev said, quote, we must not succumb to petty passions or to transient things, but should realize that if war should break out, then it would not be in our power to stop it. For such is the logic of war. I have participated in 2 wars and know that war ends when it has rolled through cities and villages, everywhere sowing death and destruction. Premier Khrushchev went on to say that, quote, we are of sound mind and understand perfectly well that if we attack you, you will respond the same way. He continued, quote, we want not to destroy your country, but despite our ideological differences, to compete peacefully, not by military means. The remainder of Premier Khrushchev's letter expressed more concern regarding the philosophic futility of war and armaments. He claimed that the missile buildup was only meant to protect Cuba from invasion. Towards the end of the letter, he proposed that if the United States would promise not to invade Cuba and remove the blockade, then the missile sites in Cuba would be removed peacefully. The crisis seemed to be closing to an end, but the entangled web of confrontation had not been untangled yet. Saturday, October 27th. A U-2 reconnaissance aircraft was shot down by a SAM missile originating from Cuba. The plane had crashed on Cuban soil and Major Rudolph Anderson Jr. was dead, the Soviet Union, through Cuba, apparently was preparing to do battle. Instead of retaliating in a military manner, our president decided to transmit a final peace letter to Premier Khrushchev. It stated that the United States would agree to remove the quarantine and give assurances against an invasion of Cuba. In return, we would expect the immediate removal of the Russian weapon systems from Cuba, as expressed in the letter of October 26th. Sunday, October 28th. On the 13th day of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the end of the world was near. It was felt by all that the invasion of Cuba would shortly be inevitable. At most, the United States could wait a day before taking the inevitable action. For 24 hours, there would be nothing to do but wait for a response from Premier Khrushchev. At 10 a.m., the reply was relayed by Secretary Rusk. The Russians agreed to withdraw the missiles. The Cuban crisis was over. Peace prevailed. Whew! Now I ask you, my reader, why did nuclear war not occur? What were the dynamics of human nature that protected us from total annihilation? Let us analyze the above information for a possible answer. 1. A confrontation had definitely occurred between the United States and Russia. 2. The blockade event of October 24th could have triggered a war, but it did not. The high officials of Russia gave the order to stop the Russian vessels from traveling to Cuba. They did not order an offensive at that time. Why didn't they? The United States took the first offensive move. If the Russians wanted war, they could have justifiably escalated the events. 3. When the missile sites in Cuba were being activated the following day, we could have invaded with the world on our side. We did not. President Kennedy sent a warning letter instead. 4. The United States prepared to invade Cuba if necessary. No doubt Russia knew of our intents, yet they did not attack. Premier Khrushchev sent a peace letter to President Kennedy instead. He made an offer on how peace could be achieved. 5. As a final blow, the U-2 plane was shot down. Certainly war should have started then. The Russians deceived us, didn't they? Instead, a final peace letter was sent by President Kennedy. The offer was accepted by Premier Khrushchev. The peace and balance of the world was maintained. So what do the facts mean in the light of this Ananke? Can it be explained in an Ananke way? Was this event guided by chance or law? Talking from an Ananke perspective, we can view this crisis as one of the many disturbances that can happen to any dynamic equilibrium situation. The world is in a state of dynamic equilibrium, dynamic balance, with regard to the major world powers. When negative change or disruptions occur, what does Ananke do? Does it not call upon the opposing forces to contain the disruption and bring the situation back to equilibrium again? Does it not require that these forces act in a gradual, least negative, least destructive manner? Did this not occur during the Cuban Missile Crisis? Of course it did. Ananke was guiding the minds of the great leaders, whether the great leaders believed in Ananke or not. It was suggesting the best course of action in order to achieve peace once more. President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev wanted peace. They both knew that a nuclear war would be a lose-lose situation. Even madmen don't want to die. They were compelled by their own self-interests to find the win-win. Despite offensive maneuvers and the death of a United States officer, nuclear war did not occur. All the major powers knew that nuclear war was suicide. The opportunity for war was ample. The probability of war seemed high. Offensive events occurred and gave reason for escalation. It should have happened. The world should have ended on that 13th day, but it did not. It was not in the self-interest of the parties involved. The dominant human property of self-interest, which can be the origin of all that is evil, turned out to be the motivating factor of all that was good. Peace and balance is everyone's self-interest. Ananke is guiding us towards increased levels of peace and happiness for all. Disturbances will always occur. Third World War is likely, as well as offensive mistakes by major powers. Let me say that again. Third world countries, namely Third World War, is likely, as well as offensive mistakes by the major powers. A nuclear bombing may occur by accident, but the odds are low that it will escalate into a full-blown Holocaust. It should have happened in 1962, but it did not. Ananke is guiding man's mind toward the universal goal of peace and happiness for all. Will there be world peace? I believe the odds are extremely high that world peace will prevail within the next 100 years. The world's major powers are philosophic experiments in the organizing of people towards the purpose of peaceful coexistence. These experiments are attempts to obey Ananke by organizing the human species in states of equilibrium that contain the least disturbances possible. The major ideologies seem to compete for the privilege of organizing the remainder of the world. As Premier Khrushchev said, quote, "We want to compete peacefully, not by military means." Therefore, the world will eventually be divided among the philosophic ideological expressions here on Earth. At that point, conventional war will not be necessary. The major powers will hold all the cards. The world will be maintained in a state of dynamic equilibrium, whereby the major opposing forces will keep the peace by virtue of their own self-interest. However, some destruction will occur, but the losses will be minimized. Minor disturbances will be controlled in a least negative manner. Prosperity and productivity will prevail. The poor will be utilized by the large corporations. In return, they will be fed, sheltered, clothed, and educated. Science will flourish and deliver new tools to counter disease and famine. Space will be conquered. There will be room to grow. Man will flourish, and the peace and balance of the world will be maintained for an extended period of time and apparent forever. This is indeed a hopeful scenario to imagine. However, a question begs to be asked. Is peace inevitable, or do we have a chance at blowing ourselves up and ending the species called man? Although the odds of a nuclear holocaust are low, they nonetheless exist. Yes, we can destroy ourselves and become extinct like the dinosaurs of the past. We have a definite period of time to conform to the laws of the Ananke. If we do not follow the way, then the forces and dynamics of the Ananke can and will destroy us. Ananke, in a way of speaking, acts as if it, quote, wants peace and balance for all things, to include animals, plants, and the environment. If we violate the balance beyond Ananke's tolerance, then we will surely perish. This period of time is unique in man's history. For the first time, man has the capability of peace and prosperity for all, or the total destruction of the human race as we know it. In the evolution of man's mind, we are at the crossroads. Ananke has revealed to us the power of nuclear fusion. This power can be used to keep the peace or to end it. Do we go against the flow and experience the ultimate pain of nuclear holocaust? Or do we keep the peace and enjoy the natural gifts that Ananke will provide? The choice is ours. Ananke would prefer peace. It would prefer a world of live and help live. It is more efficient to have peace on Earth than to start a new life form after a nuclear holocaust. But a nuclear catastrophe can happen if we do not follow the way to peace through lesson learning and voluntary behavior modification. If we follow the way, the rewards will be plentiful. We will enjoy less pain here on Earth. We will enjoy the maximum state of happiness that is possible at this point in time for the circumstances that we have been given. And we may even influence our inclinations in the next life. There can be no doubt that there is ample reason to try, but behavior modification is hard. It is difficult to interpret the right way given the guidance of the four primary patterns. Circumstances appear extremely unique and idiosyncratic. Shouldn't there be a way to receive help and guidance in accord with this Ananke? Shouldn't there be a place where functional, pragmatic philosophy is discussed? The ancient Greeks had specific locations where dialectic could prevail. Greek philosophers and ordinary citizens gathered to pose questions and speculate answers. Shouldn't we have a place where we can learn more about this Ananke and pose practical questions to the dialectic audience that gathers there? If this place existed, what would be its purpose? What would be its form? What services would it render? What would we call this place of pragmatic philosophy? Let me check the time. And we're 24 minutes. I can do one more section maybe. This place could be called the Temple of the Ananke. Do we really need another temple? Don't we have enough already? Don't the religions of the world and their temples supply enough satisfaction? I don't believe that the organized religions meet the needs of the questioning people of this world. Religion is based on pure faith that is justified by the logic that may apply. Religion, as it is formed today, cannot deal with contradiction. In the past, contradictions of opinion precipitated new sects or entirely new religions to appear. Buddhism came from Hinduism due to differences of opinion and revelation. The sects of Christianity emerged due to the same phenomena. Gradual change and evolution of thought is not allowed within any given religious institution. Ideas based on faith cannot be changed. They must be believed or abandoned. However, ideas based on reason, experimentation, and logical speculation can be reviewed, discussed, debated, and evolved. Higher thoughts can emerge without revolution or blind revelation. Preaching does not have to be the norm of religious communication. We have unique minds. We are intelligent creatures. We can think and question. We should have the right to obtain the proper answers through the use of dialectic among thinking peers and experts. This is the primary virtue of man's mind and the proposed temple. Therefore, this place becomes a location where the functional philosophy of Ananke can be debated and understood. Not only should the great philosophers be revisited in the light of this concept, but the teachings of all the world religions should be investigated in order to extract the best approaches that conform to the four patterns in the scheme of things. This temple of Ananke should utilize all the great minds of history in order to create its initial dogma. The resulting philosophy should express the practical approaches to life and the possible ways to attain a maximum state of happiness. Above all, the doctrines of this philosophy should evolve as new data and ideas come forth. It should be a place where discussion and debate over its dogma is encouraged. Preaching should only be used in order to present a new idea for the congregation to examine, test, and possibly employ. The Temple of Ananke should be a place where givers of any religion, a religious denomination, could congregate and network together. It should be a place to create new hypotheses about life, test old ones, and recommend approaches to the world at large. A primary goal should be its service to the community in which it resides. To promote balance and peace within the community should be one of the primary directives of this organization. The temple should also expose us to the religious ceremonies that exist in the world. These rituals could be acted out, enjoyed, understood, and experienced. Religious organizations could be invited to speak and share with us some of their ancient rituals and positive philosophic principles. Moreover, the temple of the Ananke should be a refuge where we could rest from the world at large. It should be a sanctuary where we could elevate our spirit to the realm of religious philosophic thought. In addition, it should attract a congregation that delivers a feeling of peace and belonging to all that enter their door. In essence, if we are distressed and confused, we should emerge from this temple feeling emotionally better than when we first arrived. We should emerge feeling closer to the universal mind and its order, Ananke. Summary. The philosophy of Ananke is an intriguing metaphysical concept that can guide our actions in life toward the goal of peace and the feeling of happiness. The four highest patterns of this order direct us to take action with its flow. We have seen that the pattern of balance, harmony, tranquility, and peace is the dominant tendency in the cosmos. Unfortunately, the resulting dynamic equilibrium systems are disrupted by external forces. This disruption may simply be the adjustment to a new state of relative balance between things, or it may be the chance entropy forces, which are constantly battling the cohesive forces of our universe. In either case, the second pattern of negative and positive change is real. Once the imbalance is realized, the opposing forces emerge in order to control and contain the chaos. The opposites, utilizing least negative tactics, struggle to achieve balance once more. Eventually, chaos is controlled in a least destructive manner. Balance and peace prevails once more. The cycle is perpetual and omnipresent. The material universe behaves in this manner, differing only in cycle time. Small objects relative to man act quickly and regain their balance in a speedy manner. Large objects act slowly and regain their harmony in longer periods of time. The four patterns may cycle in less than a nanosecond or may take billions of years to evolve. Although different cycle times exist, the fact remains that all particles and creatures, that all things act in a similar way. All things are guided by the above four patterns. All things behave as mere extensions to these ultimate forms. The quote-unquote formula of the Ananke is real. The patterns reveal a direction of flow. If we promote peace and balance, then we go with the flow. If we promote disruption for our own self-interest to the exclusion of others, then we go against the flow. Happiness can be achieved, or at least approached, by going with the flow of this Ananke. Its purpose must be our purpose. We are extensions of it. We are the products of the universe and its order. From the facts of Ananke, we have speculated many things in a logical manner. Our conscious mind exists, may indeed be our soul. Our soul retains the properties of awareness and inclination. Our soul has always been and always will be. Reincarnation seems to be likely. This process deposits us in appropriate bodies depending on our actions in this life. Our actions or deeds influence our behavior, and our behaviors influence our inclinations. In turn, our inclinations determine the inevitable outcome. In this manner, law and justice prevails in the birth-death karmic cycle. We have speculated that a superconscious mind exists that resides in all matter. This mind is non-reflective, non-whimsical, pure directed thought. Its purpose is to occupy equilibrium systems, be in opposition to the matter contained within, and supply the never-ending thought of peace which causes the primary purpose to prevail. This mind is not divided in the universe. This mind is God. As for man, the purpose becomes clear. Go with the flow of Ananke, survive as long as you can, learn your lessons well, change your behavior if needed, and above all, try to live in peace. And so we close the book on the philosophy of the Ananke. We have examined the patterns in a thorough manner. We have no doubt that these patterns culminate in a single purpose, as if it comes from a single source. We are sure of the Ananke, this ultimate order of things, but we still have doubt about the existence of God because we cannot see it. We cannot see the mind. We can only see its manifestation. We have come close through logical deductive reasoning to the realization of God. We have closed the gap to within an inch of true belief. Unfortunately, you and I will have to jump this chasm alone. Until more evidence is discovered, we must have a little faith in order to make the final leap. Until then, allow me to leave you with an Ananke-type prayer. A prayer to God and its order Ananke. Dear God, reflection of the order in the universe, bless this day so that it may bring harmony and balance to our troubled spirits. May the discords in our life be diminished. May our lives be full of happiness by promoting your way, the way to tranquility, the way to harmony, the way to balance, and the way to peace. May our transgressions be resolved with lessons. May we learn our lessons well, so that we may feel happiness and everlasting joy. Amen. And now, in the next part, we have many, many updates since the 1985 book, which I think you'll find intriguing. So that primary book, composed of 6 chapters, was basically to tell you what my thoughts were in 1985. They have evolved and answer many other questions. It is now 2017. A lot has happened. So I hope you enjoy the update section. But for now, we will go ahead and end this part of the book. Take care. See you next time.